What does it feel like to drive a road where the insurance company refuses to cover you? Not because you're a bad driver, not because your car is old, but because the road itself is considered too dangerous to insure. There are 25 roads on this planet where that question stops being hypothetical. Some hang over cliffs with no barrier. Some run through tunnels where the air slowly poisons you. Some pass through territory controlled by armed groups who decide in that moment whether you get through or you don't. And every single one of them has something in common. People use them every day. Not thrill seekers, not explorers, just people trying to get somewhere. Parents bringing medicine home, truck drivers on a deadline, students going to school. Today, we'll travel all 25. We'll start with roads that make your hands sweat just watching. Then move into something stranger roads, where the danger isn't the cliff or the weather. It's the people. And at the very end, we'll arrive at a road that will make you rethink what dangerous even means. But first, a question. Would you drive a road if you knew it killed 300 people last year? What if it was the only road available? Hold that thought, because by the end of this video, your answer might surprise you. Let's begin where it's most visible, most obvious, most terrifying. The edge of a cliff. Bolivia's North Yungas Road has a name that no tourism board would ever choose. The Inter-American Development Bank gave it the title officially, the most dangerous road in the world. It earned that. The road drops from 4,650 meters at the top of the Andes down to 1,200 meters in the jungle below, nearly 3.5 kilometers of vertical change in a single stretch. The surface is mostly dirt, barely 3 meters wide, with one side offering nothing but open air, dropping hundreds of meters straight into the Bolivian jungle. For most of the year, clouds roll in so thick that drivers can't see past the hood. Rain turns the surface into wet clay. Every corner is blind. For decades, this road killed between 200 and 300 people every year, 200 to 300 lives, on one road. If you walk it today, you'll see crosses, not one or two, hundreds. Local drivers pass them every time and barely notice. The crosses have become part of the landscape. Since 2006, a new paved road handles most of the traffic. But here's the twist. The old death road is now one of Bolivia's biggest tourist attractions. Cyclists from around the world come specifically to ride it. Because the beauty is genuine. Cloud forest waterfalls appearing through the mist, the jungle falling away thousands of meters below. It is one of the most visually stunning rides on Earth. The fear and the beauty live on exactly the same road. That's going to be a theme today. Same cliff, different mountain range, completely different reason why people drive it. Nepal's Karnali Highway cuts through the remote western Himalayas, connecting isolated villages to the rest of the country. For many communities, this road is not an option. It is the only option. Below, the Karnali River carves through gorges hundreds of meters deep. The road surface is unpaved. In monsoon season, sections wash away. Landslides happen often enough that locals know which hillsides are unstable, the way you know which streets in your city have bad traffic. More than 100 people die on this highway every year. But here's what makes the Karnali different. From a road you'd simply close, take it away, and entire communities lose access to hospitals, markets, and schools. The danger of the road versus the danger of total isolation, that calculation has been made here for generations. There's something quietly extraordinary about that. Using a road you know is dangerous, not for adventure, but just to live. If the Karnali is a slow, grinding danger, Peru's Andean roads deliver something sudden, silent, and final. These roads are famous for a specific type of accident: a bus, a mountain curve, a drop of hundreds of meters, sometimes 10 victims, sometimes 60. On the tightest curves, the outer wheels of a bus hang in open air over the valley below. Not almost over the edge, actually over the edge. The vehicle's weight is the only thing keeping it on the road. Add fog, add ice, add a driver awake since 3 a.m. on a route he drives 6 days a week. The math is brutal. But the Andes at dawn look like something that shouldn't exist. Pink light on snow peaks, valleys so deep they disappear into cloud, villages clinging to slopes that appear vertical. Traveling through that landscape, even on a dangerous road, is a visual experience people carry for the rest of their lives. Peru's mountain roads will scare you. They will also show you something extraordinary. That tension is exactly what makes them impossible to forget. We've covered 3 countries, 3 different cliffs, 3 different reasons people drive them. But what if I told you the next 2 roads don't kill with cliffs at all? One kills with the ground suddenly disappearing. The other kills with the ground moving while you're on it. Deep in the Peruvian Amazon, the roads have a schedule problem. Not a traffic schedule, a landslide schedule. The jungle here receives so much rainfall that certain hillsides are always in the process of sliding. Locals know which sections move in which months. They've built an entire system of local knowledge around the fact that the road beneath them is unreliable. A landslide in the Amazon doesn't look like slow erosion. It looks like a section of road and everything on it simply stopping to exist. Trees, soil, gravel, any vehicles on that patch of earth, all dropping into the valley below in under a minute. There are documented cases of buses vanishing completely. No debris visible from above. No warning for the vehicles behind. Rescue operations can take days because the same conditions that cause the slide also make the valley nearly impossible to reach. And yet local drivers use these roads, constantly reading the color of the soil, the sound of the forest, the recent rainfall, making judgment calls every few minutes about whether to continue or wait. Driving in the Amazon is not a skill, it's a form of reading. This one looks completely normal. That's precisely why it belongs on this list. The Autopista del Sol is a modern paved multi-lane highway connecting Mexico City to Acapulco. Lane markings, overhead signs, rest stops. From the air, it looks like any highway in Europe or the United States. But underneath sections of this road, the earth is hollow. Underground cavities form slowly invisible from the surface. When heavy rainfall saturates the soil, the ceiling collapses without warning. A sinkhole opens in seconds with no visible precursor. Drivers have encountered sinkholes here at 100 kilometers per hour, not a crack appearing, not a gradual dip, a section of road 2 meters deep just gone. The specific horror of this road is psychological. On a mountain road, your brain stays alert. You can see the edge. You adapt. On a smooth, modern highway, your guard drops completely. And that's exactly when the road opens up beneath you. So far, every danger has come from the earth, the mountain, the jungle, the ground. The next group is more complicated. Here, the danger is human. There's a specific fear that comes from nature. You can see it coming, you can prepare, and then there's the fear of not knowing what a person with a weapon is going to do. On this border, there is a category of worker called pimpineros. They are fuel smugglers. They ride motorcycles loaded with hundreds of liters of gasoline in plastic containers strapped to the frame, balanced on the seat, tied wherever they can fit. Each one carries enough fuel to make a devastating fire if anything goes wrong. They ride at speed to stay ahead of enforcement. They weave through traffic. They take corners fast. Now imagine being a regular driver on a road where dozens of these motorcycles pass you every hour. But that's not the only hazard. The border region is controlled by armed groups operating informal checkpoints. Official checkpoint, then a few kilometers later, another one with no legal status, run by people with weapons who ask questions. The rules at these checkpoints are not written down. They change. Travelers describe a specific kind of alertness, of not knowing what the correct answer is to the next question, of choosing words carefully when someone is holding a weapon and you don't know what they want to hear. This road is dangerous in a way no mountain can replicate. The Nola-Bambari route exists in the loosest sense. In the dry season, it's passable. In the rainy season, it becomes something between a river and a swamp. But the physical road is the easier problem. Unofficial armed checkpoints appear and disappear along this route. Aid workers describe preparing specific documentation, specific amounts of cash, specific answers for each checkpoint. Not because the rules are clear, because they aren't. There's a detail that stays with you from accounts of this road: the dust. The red clay of Central Africa coats everything within minutes. By the time you reach a checkpoint, you and your vehicle are the same color as the road. It makes everyone look alike. It makes everyone a stranger. For the communities along this route, the road is their only connection to food, medicine, and the outside world. They navigate it not with maps, but with relationships, knowing who to call, which group controls which section on which day. That is a kind of local knowledge no GPS can replicate. In Nigeria, the most dangerous vehicles on the road aren't trucks or buses, they're motorcycles. Motorcycles, carrying hundreds of liters of black market gasoline in plastic containers, moving through public roads in broad daylight, running from enforcement. Each motorcycle is a mobile fire waiting to start. When one crashes, and they do crash, the fuel ignites. Vehicles around it catch fire. The road becomes impassable in seconds. The riders aren't reckless for the thrill of it. The income from a successful run is significant enough relative to other options available to them that the risk is worth it. A rational decision in an irrational situation. This road isn't dangerous because of terrain. It's dangerous because poverty and desperation made it that way. That's a different kind of problem, and a much harder one to fix. Haiti's mountain roads combine almost every category of danger on this list. The roads are unpaved and deteriorating, with sections collapsed into ravines. Some bridges are wooden structures held together by rope. In the rainy season, crossings become rivers. That would be enough. But these roads also pass through territory controlled by armed gangs. Movement between parts of the country has been made effectively impossible for periods of time. Convoys turned back, aid shipments seized. Drivers describe encountering a gang checkpoint as a negotiation where you don't know the price until you're already in the middle of it. What's extraordinary about Haiti, the thing people always mention after driving its roads, is the color. The Caribbean light on those mountains is unlike anywhere else, heartbreakingly beautiful. The country, underneath all of that hardship, is extraordinary. The roads are among the most dangerous in the world. Both things are devastatingly true. We've moved from cliffs to jungles to armed checkpoints. But the next section introduces a danger you can't see, can't hear, and might not notice until it's too late. What happens when the air itself becomes the enemy? The Salang Tunnel doesn't look dangerous from the outside. It's a paved road through a mountain with walls and a ceiling. But the Salang Tunnel kills you with air. Built by Soviet engineers in 1964, the Salang connects northern and southern Afghanistan through the Hindu Kush at 3,878 meters above sea level. The ventilation system has never worked properly. When heavy diesel trucks fill the 2.7-kilometer tunnel simultaneously, carbon monoxide builds faster than the system can clear it. Drivers start feeling sleepy, then confused. Their vision narrows. By the time they realize something is wrong, they may not be able to respond. In 1982, a convoy fire killed hundreds inside the tunnel. Some estimates reach 700. Many suffocated before they understood what was happening. In 2010, avalanches buried more than 2,700 vehicles in a single season. Over 150 people died. Today, trucks still queue to enter. Drivers crack windows, wrap cloth around their faces, drive fast, and hold their breath. But without the Salang, the journey from one half of Afghanistan to the other adds days through passes that are impassable in winter. The tunnel, for all its lethality, is still the fastest way through. When you understand that the line of trucks waiting to enter starts to make sense. At 5,600 meters above sea level, the air contains roughly half the oxygen of sea level. Not a little less, half. At that altitude, your thinking slows in ways you don't always notice. Your reactions lengthen, your judgment softens, and the worst part, you often don't feel it happening. You feel fine until you very suddenly don't. Now drive a vehicle on a road barely wide enough for one car, covered in loose gravel and ice with a cliff drop on one side. This is a regular workday for the truck drivers and army convoys that supply remote Ladakh, one of the highest inhabited regions on Earth. The army trains its drivers for this. They know the signs of altitude sickness and stop when needed. But civilian vehicles use the same roads, and not everyone recognizes the moment when their judgment has become unreliable. Somewhere between 4,000 and 5,600 meters, without warning, your brain quietly begins to work against you. The mountains don't announce what they're doing to you. That's what makes them remarkable, and that's what makes them deadly. So far, these roads mostly threaten your life in one sharp moment. But some roads don't threaten with a cliff or a gunpoint. They wear you down, slowly, kilometer by kilometer, until the journey itself becomes the enemy. 3 meters. That is the width of Zhangjiajie Pass, the only road connecting Kashmir to Ladakh at 3,538 meters above sea level. One side rock wall, other side a cliff dropping hundreds of meters with no barrier. During the few months it's open, it carries military trucks, civilian buses, and supply convoys all going in both directions, all on 3 meters of road. When two large vehicles meet head-on at Zhangjiajie, one has to reverse, with a cliff behind them, in fog, sometimes in snow. Reverse slowly. Don't look at the drop. Don't look at the drop. Drivers who work this road regularly have developed a calm that first-time passengers find difficult to process. They back toward the cliff edge the way most people back out of a parking space, methodically, without drama. Sit on the outside edge of that bus and look out the window. Nothing but open air and a valley floor far below, and it is one of the most viscerally terrifying experiences available on a public road anywhere in the world. Zhangjiajie is on the official road network. You can find it on Google Maps. That fact alone says something remarkable about what humans have decided is acceptable. Nanga Parbat is the 9th highest mountain in the world. Its other name is Killer Mountain. The road to its base camp, Fairy Meadows, honors that reputation from the very first kilometer. Unpaved, barely wide enough for one vehicle, running along the edge of a steep slope with no guardrails, no barriers, nothing between the door and the valley floor below. What passengers remember most is the sound. When tires move over loose gravel near the edge, stones roll off. You hear them leave. You wait, and then you hear them land. The silence between those two sounds is the measurement of how far down the bottom is. Not meters, not feet, sound. But Fairy Meadows at the end is genuinely one of the most beautiful places in Pakistan. Wildflowers, the entire south face of Nanga Parbat, filling the sky above. A silence so complete you can hear your own heartbeat. The drive terrifies you. The destination rewards you completely. That equation is why this road sees more visitors every year, not fewer. New Zealand's rental car agreements contain a specific clause. Skipper's Canyon Road is excluded from coverage. Not discouraged, not flagged, excluded, completely. The road runs through a historic Gold Rush Canyon near Queenstown. 22 kilometers of single-lane gravel, sheer drops, tight turns, and sections so narrow that two vehicles physically cannot pass each other. The road curves around solid rock faces, so you cannot see oncoming traffic until you are already facing it. When two vehicles meet, one has to reverse to the nearest passing point. On a road with drops on one side, reversing requires nerve that not everyone has. Almost everyone who drives it describes the same thing, a level of sustained quiet fear that starts at the first narrow section and doesn't leave until you're back on the main road. The canyon itself is beautiful. The gold rush history is real remnants of old workings are still visible along the route, and it's one of the most stressful drives on Earth. That combination is exactly why it exists on every serious adventure travel list in the Southern Hemisphere. The roads so far challenge you at specific moments. One cliff, one tunnel, one narrow section. What happens when the danger is everywhere all at once for hundreds of kilometers without a break? More than 600 curves in a single road. Panlong Ancient Road in Yunnan Province climbs to 4,100 meters above sea level through the Laojun mountain range. 600 curves means you are almost never going straight, turn after turn after turn, each one requiring full attention, each at altitude, where your brain is quietly running on less oxygen than it wants. By the time you've navigated 300 curves, you're tired. Your hands are stiff. Your focus has been working at full capacity for hours. And you're halfway. Here's what makes it worth it. The views are extraordinary. Alpine meadows, ancient Tibetan Buddhist forests, the sweep of the Yunnan highlands. The light at high altitude does things to color that lower elevations cannot replicate. Photographers come specifically for this. But local drivers know the quiet math. 600 turns, thin air, slippery surface, tired driver. The numbers add up in only one direction if you lose your concentration. On Panlong, the mountain doesn't offer rest stops. If Panlong is endurance, Tianmen is intensity. 99 turns in 11 kilometers. A vertical climb so dramatic that your ears pop and the engine changes note as it fights for air. Each switchback, inside wall, outside valley, getting further away with every curve. Above, if clouds part for a moment, the dark entrance of Tianmen Cave, a natural arch through the mountain that looks like a window cut by something impossibly large. Fog isn't occasional on Tianmen. It's the default. Visibility can drop to a few meters in seconds. Drivers navigate the 99 turns by feel by the sound of gravel under wheels, by a kind of earned intimacy with the mountain. There's an annual motorsport race held on this road. From a helicopter, the footage looks impossible. Cars like toys sliding up a wall. Being inside one of those cars at turn 47 in the fog is a different experience entirely. The most dramatic roads kill suddenly. The roads in this final chapter work differently. They wear you down over days, over mud, over distances that should take hours but take weeks, until exhaustion itself becomes the danger. In Papua's highlands, a 50-kilometer journey can take 3 days. Not Because the vehicles are slow. Because the road stops being a road. A section washed out. A bridge rotted through. A section of mud so deep, the vehicle sinks past its wheel wells and has to be extracted meter by meter. Drivers carry chains, ropes, shovels, and spare parts as standard equipment. They know every community along the route, because those communities are their only source of help when something goes wrong. For the communities in the interior, this road is the difference between connection and complete isolation, between reaching a hospital and not. For travelers willing to make it the interior of Papua, the primary forests, the traditional cultures, the landscapes almost no outsider ever sees, offers an experience of genuine remoteness that is nearly impossible to find anywhere else on Earth. On a map, BR 319 is a line connecting Manaus in the Amazon basin to Porto Velho in Rondônia state. On the ground, in wet season, it's a test of whether you still want to be here. During the rainy season, the unpaved middle stretch turns into channels of liquid mud that can swallow the wheel hubs of a large truck. Caravans travel together, the only sensible strategy, taking turns getting stuck and pulling each other out. A convoy can take a week to cover a section that took 2 hours in October. Drivers stop measuring the journey in kilometers. They measure it in events. How many extractions? How many nights sleeping on the road in the jungle? And the jungle around BR 319 is extraordinary. Primary Amazon forest, dense, ancient, full of noise and movement. At night, anchored in mud somewhere between Manaus and Porto Velho, the sound of the forest is overwhelming. Dangerous and magnificent at the same time. Always the same combination. The mining industry in Congo's Katanga province has produced vast amounts of copper and cobalt. It has also destroyed the roads. Heavy mining trucks move ore from mines to processing facilities along routes not designed for this weight. The result: road surfaces ground into sequences of deep holes, ridges, and sections that are more obstacle course than road. The dust is extraordinary. Vehicles move through clouds of fine red dust that reduce visibility to near zero. Drivers follow the vehicle in front by sound as much as sight. When trucks break down, and they do constantly, they block the road for kilometers. Wait times measured in hours, sometimes days. Congo has the minerals the world needs. The roads that carry them out reflect in concrete terms exactly what has been invested back into the country. This one isn't a road, but it belongs on this list. The train is rated to carry 700 passengers. It carries 2,000. People sit in every seat. stand in every corridor ride, on the roof, hang from the doors. A journey of several hundred kilometers can take 3 days, sometimes more. When you understand that there are no real alternatives, that the roads in this region are among the worst on the continent, the image of 2,000 people crowded onto a 700-person train stops looking like chaos and starts looking like resilience. These people are not making a bad decision. They're making the best decision available to them. That distinction matters. It matters for how we look at every road in this video. In 1972, the villages of Guoliang, isolated in the Taihang Mountains, asked the government for a road. The government said no. So they built it themselves. 13 men spent 5 years chiseling a tunnel through solid rock by hand. The tunnel they carved is 1.2 kilometers long, 5 meters wide, and along its walls they cut openings. Windows looking straight out of the mountain at the valley hundreds of meters below. No glass, no barriers, just open holes in the rock. The tunnel is spectacular. It is also entirely hand-built by farmers with no engineering training, designed by instinct and courage rather than structural calculation. The men who built it called it a necessity. It's been named one of the most terrifying roads in China. Both things are true. The Dalton Highway runs 666 kilometers from Fairbanks to Prudhoe Bay through the Alaskan wilderness above the Arctic Circle. No towns, no services, no cell signal, no help. In winter, temperatures reach -40 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, a breakdown isn't an inconvenience, it's an emergency with a countdown. Truckers carry survival gear, extra fuel, emergency supplies. They check everything before each trip because on the Dalton, a mechanical failure left unaddressed becomes fatal. The road surface is loose gravel and ice. A moose crossing at highway speed is equivalent to hitting a wall built from 500 kilograms of muscle and bone. The landscape is vast, raw, ancient, and completely indifferent to human life. Wilderness always is. In parts of Congo, rail lines cross major roads with no barriers, no lights, no warning bells. The trains are enormous, hundreds of tons moving at speed through dense forest, where the tracks aren't always visible until you're almost on them. The protocol is simple and terrifying. Slow down wind, the window down, listen. If you hear nothing, proceed slowly. Check again. Trucks and buses have been destroyed by trains they never saw coming. The train crew sometimes didn't see them either. The margin for error on wet roads with heavy vehicles is not large enough to trust silence alone. corridor between Ethiopia and Djibouti carries enormous volumes of freight. It also carries a constant hanging dust, the kind that turns the air orange behind every truck and reduces visibility for minutes at a time. In that dust, at road crossings, where trains pass without warning, systems drivers navigate by experience. They know the schedule roughly, but schedules slip, trains arrive early, and a train at a crossing you thought was clear is a mistake you only make once. We've traveled across 6 continents, over cliffs, through poisoned tunnels, past armed checkpoints, through jungles that swallow vehicles whole. And now, at the very end of this journey, one more road. This one won't kill you. It probably won't even scratch you. But it will make you think. Warsaw, Poland. A major European capital. Modern infrastructure. No cliffs, no jungle, no armed checkpoints. And yet the Rondo-Washingtona roundabout has confused drivers so consistently that it's become genuinely infamous in European road culture. Multiple lanes, multiple entry and exit points, tram lines cutting through at angles, signage that even locals find ambiguous. The danger here is the chain reaction fender bender. The driver from out of town realizing at 60 kilometers per hour that they're in the wrong lane, surrounded by traffic with a tram coming from a direction they weren't tracking. The roundabout has been redesigned several times. It remains a puzzle. Why include it here, alongside roads that kill hundreds of people a year? Because Rondo-Washingtona is a reminder that danger on roads isn't always about terrain, or weather, or armed groups. Sometimes it's about the gap between how a system was designed and how humans actually use it, between the map and the territory. That gap exists on every road in this video in different forms. We've traveled 25 roads today. Some will be improved. New pavement will replace dirt. Barriers will be added. Tunnels will be reinforced. But the geography won't change. The Andes will still rise. The Amazon will still flood. The Hindu Kush will still generate avalanches in winter. Here's the thought I kept coming back to while researching this video. Almost none of these roads are dangerous because someone made a reckless decision. The driver on the Karnali Highway is making the only journey available to him. The mother on the Andean bus is taking her child to a hospital that doesn't exist closer to home. The truck driver on the Dalton is doing his job because someone in the city needs what he's carrying. The roads are dangerous. The people using them are just trying to get somewhere. There's a question I asked you at the beginning. Would you drive a road if you knew it killed 300 people last year? What if it was the only road available? Most of the people in this video don't get to answer that question. They already know the answer. They've known it their whole lives. The roads that frighten us most, The ones with no barriers, no rules, no safety nets, are for millions of people simply the roads that connect them to the rest of the world. We call them dangerous. They call them home roads. And maybe the most important thing we can do after watching a video like this is remember the difference.
Oh my God, it's...
Close your eyes. Imagine you're standing between two sheer tectonic cliff sides. Beneath your feet, there is no ground, no concrete, just rotting wooden planks, half a step apart, grinding against each other in the lethal crosswinds. Below you, 150 meters down, a glacial river is moving, cold as steel, and completely indifferent to who you are. You have to cross. There is no other way around. There is no other choice. This is not a horror film. This is the daily commute for millions of people navigating impossible places on bridges the world had no reason to build, which no one dares to cross without fighting absolute panic. Humans have been building bridges for 3,000 years, not because they wanted to conquer nature, but because on the other side of that geological rupture was someone's home, an agricultural field that needed tending, a remote village that needed supplies, a child waiting for a father to come back. But there are hostile environments on this planet where topographical reality never intended humans to cross. And we built bridges there anyway. Welcome to a documentary about the world's most terrifying bridges. Some structural anomalies are so high that clouds drift beneath the wheels of passing cars. Some are so fragile you can see the terminal drop through the gaps under your feet. Some are made entirely of glass, hanging 300 meters in the sky, forcing your brain to fight its own survival instincts. And some shouldn't even be physically possible to drive on. This is a journey through 10 of them. Not a list, not a countdown. A journey from survival to wonder, from raw human need to the surreal edges of what extreme civil engineering can become, from a fraying rope bridge in the Gilgit-Baltistan region of northern Pakistan to an optical illusion in western Japan. And the question you'll carry through all of it isn't what are these bridges made of? It's why does humanity never know when to stop? The Hunza River doesn't flow. It forces its way through. Down through the rugged high-altitude terrain of the Karakoram Valley in northern Pakistan, between cliffs as black as coal, it moves with the kind of noise that fills the entire valley, a low, constant, seismic-like roar you feel in your chest before you hear it with your ears. Stand on the bank long enough and you stop noticing the sound. It becomes the silence. And strung across that river, high above the water, is the thing people call the Husseini Suspension Bridge, often cited as one of the world's most dangerous crossings. A single thread of rope and wood wide enough for one person sitting at a dizzying elevation above sea level. Look closely at the floor. Some planks are gone. They fell a long time ago and nobody replaced them. You can look straight through those gaps and see the turbulent glacial runoff below. Every morning, people from the village of Husseini walk across this perilous rope bridge to reach their fields. Children cross it to get to school. Elderly men and women take it one step at a time, hands tight on the corroding wire cables, eyes fixed straight ahead. Never looking down, never. An older man steps onto the bridge. Wind hits. The whole suspension structure lurches. He doesn't stop, doesn't hesitate, keeps walking. The frightening thing isn't the bridge. The frightening thing is that for him, this is just the morning commute in this extreme mountain environment. Right beside the Hussaini Bridge are the ruins of an older one. You can still see the anchor points drilled into the bedrock where the cables used to be fixed. That bridge was destroyed by flash flooding in the 1970s. The villagers built this replacement using whatever materials they could carry in on foot because there was no road to bring anything heavier. And if this one goes too, they'll build another, because on the other side, there's still a field, still a school, still a reason. Stand on the Hussaini suspension bridge in a strong wind, and the whole thing sways. Not vibrates, not trembles. Sways like a giant hammock trying to throw you off. The cables scream. The wood groans without stopping. And the people of Hussaini still cross it, every single day. From Pakistan, the journey moves west, into Iran, into a different kind of impossible. The Veresk Bridge is a monumental single-stone arch, 110 meters tall, thrown across a secluded gorge in the rugged Ulborz Mountains. No steel, no cables, just masterful masonry brick and concrete curved and stacked with surgical precision. And across it every day, a full passenger train rolls through the mountains between the capital city of Tehran and the Caspian Sea. Stand at the bottom of the gorge and look up. The arch rises above you, the sheer rock walls on both sides closing in, and if the sun is behind the bridge, the whole thing turns gold. That is the bridge. That is what 110 meters looks like from below a defiance of gravity in stone. This isn't the impossible of poverty and necessity like the bridge back in Pakistan. This is the impossible of human ambition, the kind that makes people look at an impassable mountain range and decide to force a railway through it anyway. European engineers built this in 1935. Hand drills, wooden scaffolding dynamite, a multinational crew, Danish, Austrian, Italian, working in a gorge that had no road, in no easy way to lift anything, no margin for geological mistakes. It took years. Some of them didn't make it home. The bridge has been running trains for nearly 90 years. During the geopolitical crisis of World War II, Hitler asked Reza Shah to destroy it to cut Allied supply lines to the Soviet Union. Reza Shah refused. Churchill later called it the Bridge of Victory. Nobody calls it that anymore, just Veresk, just the architectural marvel in the Iranian mountains that shouldn't exist and keeps running anyway. From the ancient mountains of Iran, the journey makes a leap, not just in geography, but in scale. From handmade to machine-made. From 1935 to 2016. from one man's ambition to an entire valley that had kept two provinces apart for centuries. Try to hold this in your head. The Eiffel Tower is 300 meters tall. It's one of the tallest structures in Europe, and you have to nearly break your neck to see the top from the ground. The Beipanjiang Bridge is taller than the Eiffel Tower, and cars drive across it every day. The road surface sits 565 meters above the river below, not above sea level, above the water flowing directly underneath it. When you see this bridge from a drone, you see what it doesn't want you to see: thick white fog filling the entire valley and the bridge rising out of it like a thread someone forgot to put away. The trucks crawling across the top look like ants. Before this bridge existed, crossing from Guizhou to Yunnan took 5 hours, winding mountain switchbacks, crumbling road edges, sheer drops with no barrier. Now it takes 1 hour. That's what this bridge actually is. Not a record, a door that didn't exist before. Building it nearly didn't happen. The rock walls of this valley are soft limestone, riddled with hidden caves and cracks the engineers couldn't see until they were already inside the mountain. Most bridge designs need massive anchors drilled into the banks. This rock couldn't hold them. The geology was, in the words of the chief engineer, a nightmare. The only solution was a design where all the weight travels through cables into the towers, nothing touching the banks at all, and to build the deck across 720 meters of open air with no scaffolding possible. At this height, they extended it outward from both towers at once, section by section, balancing the weight on both sides the way you'd balance a scale, never letting it tip. One mistake in the tension of a single cable, and the whole thing pulls apart. The men who built this worked over 500 meters above the river. The valley floor was often invisible beneath them. In winter, ice formed on the cables and fell onto the deck below, so engineers moved every cable to the outer edges of the bridge, forcing the ice to fall into the valley instead. When the bridge opened in December 2016, it entered the record books, the world's highest cable-stayed road bridge. But the deputy chief engineer didn't talk about records. He stood on the deck and said, "To me, it's more like a child. It's grown up, and now it can contribute to the society." Most of the workers who built it never drove across it. They had already gone home, left behind what they made for people who will never know their names. The journey needs to breathe. After the scale of Beipanjiang, the statistics, the fog, the 500-meter drops, the body needs a moment to reset. And there is no better place for that than this. Titlis, 3,041 meters above sea level, deep in the Swiss Alps. White snow, wind carrying fine ice crystals sideways across the air. And a slender suspension bridge protruding from a cliff face, hanging in open space, the valley far below, buried in snow and silence. This is the highest pedestrian suspension bridge in Europe, 100 meters of steel grating and cable bolted into the rock and extending straight out over a 500-meter drop, 1 meter wide. That's it. enough for one person at a time. The width of your shoulders, over 500 meters of nothing. The Titulus Cliff Walk was engineered to handle storm winds and heavy snow loads, and it does without drama year after year. But standing out there, something still gets to you. It's not the height exactly, it's the scale of quiet. Below you, pine forests buried in snow look small enough to cover with one hand. The mountain doesn't acknowledge you're there. The wind moves through the bridge cables and keeps going. You realize, standing there, that the Alps were doing this long before the bridge existed and will be doing it long after. Most people grip the handrail before they even reach the middle. Not because the bridge moves, it barely does, but because the brain looks down through the steel grating at 500 meters of open air and starts making calculations you didn't ask it to make. Some people stop completely, stand there, both hands on the cable, not moving forward, not turning back, just frozen, not from the cold. And then the journey does something unexpected. Before the surreal engineering of Europe, before the glass floors and the fog-wrapped viaducts, it drops you somewhere else entirely, somewhere that has no interest in being impressive. Siberia. From above, there is nothing. Just taiga forest, black and dense, stretching to every horizon. No cities, no lights, just trees and snow and the kind of cold that doesn't feel like weather. It feels like the default state of the universe, and everything else is the exception. And somewhere in that silence, the Vitim River Bridge. 570 meters long. No railings, no streetlights, no attendant. The deck is made of Soviet-era timber planks, most of them rotting for decades, and no one has repaired them. Wide enough for exactly one vehicle. The bridge was originally built in the 1970s to serve a remote mining operation. The mine closed. The maintenance stopped. The bridge didn't. Officially, it's been closed to vehicles for years. In practice, for people living in the settlements on the far side, it's the only crossing for hundreds of kilometers in either direction. If you need to cross, there is no other way. The sounds here do the work that narration can't. Tires grinding across wood, planks flexing and creaking under the vehicle's weight, the Siberian wind moving across the rusted steel frame, bending the loose planks at the edges, and the driver's breathing, steady, controlled, but if you listen carefully, not entirely calm. A fully loaded truck moves at walking pace. In front of it, one person on foot, picking their way across the planks, turning back to signal left slower stop. The truck follows. The steel frame underneath groans under the weight. There are no guardrails. On both sides, the edge of the deck simply ends. Below it, the river 20 meters down, dark and moving. The person guiding the truck doesn't look down. They've done this before. This is the moment you understand something. Not every problem can be solved by engineering. Not every road was built with pride or care. Sometimes the only thing between you and disappearing is a rotting piece of Soviet timber. The vehicle inches forward, 10 meters to the far bank, 5 meters. Then the tires hit solid earth. The sound changes immediately. Real ground. No more wood. No more nothing underneath. Nobody is waiting on the other side. No sign, no light, just a dirt track disappearing into the dark taiga, and you still have to keep going. From the forests of Siberia, the journey surfaces back into civilization. And civilization, it turns out, has been busy. The Millau Viaduct was built to solve a specific traffic problem. Every summer, millions of drivers heading from Paris to Spain would funnel through the town of Millau in southern France, jamming a small valley town with highway traffic it was never designed to handle. The solution approved in 1996, after decades of planning debates, was to build a bridge over the entire valley. Not beside it, not through it, over it. The tallest pier reaches 245 meters taller than the Eiffel Tower itself without its antenna. Add the mast on top, and the total structure reaches 343 meters, higher than anything else in France. The total length is 2.5 kilometers. Several hundred specialist workers built it in 3 years, opening in December 2004. Those are the numbers, but numbers don't explain what it actually feels like to drive across it. The first time you do it, you come out of a tunnel. The bridge surface opens ahead of you. And then if the weather is wrong or right, depending on your perspective, the fog arrives. Dense. Headlights on in the middle of the day. The pylons on either side disappearing into white above you. What's below unclear. Where you are unknown. It feels like driving through empty space. The road itself curves slightly, a deliberate design choice, so drivers at that height always have a visual reference point ahead of them and don't lose their sense of direction in the sky. Norman Foster, the architect, called it a snake of a road, improbably thin like a razor blade. He also admitted he felt physically sick for much of the construction, watching something that had never been built before take shape over a valley 270 meters below. And when the car finally comes out of the fog, when the Tarn Valley suddenly appears below Green and Wide, the river reduced to a thin line at the bottom, the pylons reappear above you one by one, each one a different height, the tallest nearly as tall as the building you work in times 10. Not frightening, just vast. Millau was built to be used. Engineered, funded, celebrated, opened with a ceremony. It exists because a government decided it should exist. The bridges on Ai Petri exist for a different reason entirely. Ai Petri is a mountain on the Crimean Peninsula, a jagged limestone peak rising 1,234 meters above the Black Sea coast. From the resort town of Yalta below the summit, looks like a row of broken teeth against the sky. Getting up there requires either a winding mountain road or a cable car, and the cable car itself holds a record. Its upper span runs 1,670 meters without a single support pillar, the longest unsupported cable car span in Europe. You ride it through open air, watching the sea fall away beneath you, with nothing between the cable and the ground for the entire length. But that is not what brings people to Kyaiktiyo. At the summit, 2 suspension bridges connect the main plateau to the rocky outcrops, known as the teeth-jagged limestone formations that jut out from the ridge like the edge of a broken wall. Each bridge is about 45 meters long. The drop below them is 50 to 60 meters onto bare rock. The total elevation is over 1,200 meters above sea level. On a clear day, you can see the Black Sea in one direction and the entire southern coast of Crimea in the other. The bridges were installed in May 2015. They are a tourist attraction, not a necessity. There are safety harnesses, there are helmets. There is always a line of people waiting to cross. And yet almost everyone who steps onto them stops halfway. Not because of the drop. The drop is real, but it is the wind that does something else entirely. Kyaiktiyo is one of the windiest places in the region. Wind blows here 125 days a year, and when it moves at speeds that can reach 50 meters per second. That is not a breeze. That is the kind of wind that makes you genuinely recalculate your relationship with the ground beneath your feet, even when you are clipped to a safety line. There is something else about Kyaiktiyo that the travel photographs don't capture. This mountain sits on the Crimean Peninsula, a piece of land whose political status has been disputed since 2014, claimed by both Russia and Ukraine, administered by one, recognized by the other, and the subject of a conflict that reshaped European security. The tourists standing on these bridges, looking out at the Black Sea, some of them are Russian, some Ukrainian, some from neither country, standing on the same narrow strip of limestone, 3 meters wide, above the same drop in the same wind. The mountain doesn't know about any of that. The wind keeps blowing regardless. But not every kind of fear comes from height or wind. Sometimes it comes from inside your own head. Aiguille du Midi, the French Alps, 3,840 meters above sea level. There is something here called Step into the Void, a 5-sided glass box bolted into the cliff face of the summit, jutting out into open air. You walk inside, glass beneath your feet, glass on both sides, glass above your head, and below the glass air, a great deal of air, 1,000 meters of air. Before you step in, they give you a pair of fabric slippers to put on over your shoes to protect the glass floor, the floor that is the only thing between you and a kilometer of nothing. You pull them on. You step inside. The human brain has a mechanism built over millions of years of evolution. When you're standing on solid ground, you're safe. When there's no solid ground, you're in danger. Transparent glass breaks that mechanism. Your eyes say nothing under your feet, but your feet are standing on something genuinely solid. Your brain receives two contradictory signals at the same time and doesn't know how to process them. That is why people freeze inside that glass box, even knowing with complete certainty that they're safe. They know it in their head, but their body disagrees, and the body sometimes wins. In the videos filmed there, you watch it happen in real time. Someone walks in confidently, looks down, and stops. Feet planted, won't move forward, won't move back. Someone else makes it to the middle, then slowly lowers themselves to their knees and sits down on the glass floor, arms wrapped around themselves. Not praying, just trying to get lower, trying to feel something solid that their brain will accept. The glass is 12 millimeters thick, 3 layers of laminated glass. It can withstand winds of 220 kilometers per hour, completely unbreakable under any weather conditions. Everyone there knows that. It doesn't matter. If a single glass platform is enough to lock a person's legs, what happens when the entire bridge is made of glass? Zhangjiajie, Hunan Province, China. You've seen this landscape before, even if you don't know its name. This is the place that inspired the floating mountains in Avatar sandstone pillars, hundreds of meters tall, rising straight out of the ground, like the teeth of something enormous opening its mouth. And between two of those teeth, someone put a glass bridge, 430 meters long, 6 meters wide, 300 meters above the valley floor. The bridge opened in August 2016. The management expected around 8,000 visitors per day. On the first days, actual demand hit 10 times that number, 80,000 people trying to get in on a single day for a bridge built to hold 800 at once. The ticketing system collapsed entirely. They shut it down after less than 2 months, not because anything broke, but because the infrastructure around it couldn't keep up with the demand. Before it opened, engineers drove a 40-ton truck across the bridge to demonstrate its load tolerance. The deck flexed, exactly 2.16 centimeters, then returned to position. A BBC reporter was invited to take a sledgehammer to one of the glass panels. He swung it repeatedly with full force. The glass didn't break. In the videos filmed there, you watch the same thing happen again and again. People walk out, confidently reach the middle, look down, and stop. Some grip the railing and won't let go. Some sink slowly to their knees, hands pressed flat against the glass beneath them, as if trying to convince themselves it's real. Some just run arms out, eyes shut, straight to the other side. This bridge is safer than most roads in the world. Triple-layered tempered glass, each panel nearly 5 centimeters thick, engineered to withstand winds of 50 meters per second and an earthquake of magnitude 8. But nobody is thinking about that when they're standing in the middle of it, staring down through 300 meters of transparency. The body doesn't ask the brain for permission. It just runs. Before the journey ends, there is one last thing to see, because everything you've just crossed, the rotting planks, the fog, the glass, the Siberian wind, it all had one thing in common. It was real. The danger was real, or the feeling of danger was real, which amounts to the same thing. Japan has a bridge that looks like the most terrifying structure on this entire list, and it is entirely an illusion. When the photograph of Eshima Ohashi first appeared online, nobody believed it was real. A bridge so steep, it was nearly vertical. In Japan, people actually drive over that. It looked less like infrastructure and more like a roller coaster designed by someone who had stopped caring. Here is why it actually exists. Sakai Minato, on one side of Lake Nakaomi, is one of the largest fishing ports in western Japan. Dozens of large fishing vessels move in and out of that port every day. The old bridge was a drawbridge. Every time a ship needed to pass, traffic stopped for 7 to 8 minutes. Only vehicles under 14 tons could cross. Maximum 4,000 vehicles per day for a port city that was unsustainable. The solution was a fixed bridge, tall enough for ships to pass underneath without stopping traffic, 45 meters above the lake surface at its highest point. But to reach that height, within a reasonable horizontal distance, the bridge had to be steep. That steepness is not a design quirk. It is the direct consequence of keeping the fishing fleet moving. Locals call it Betabumizaka, the pedal to the metal slope. A Daihatsu car commercial filmed there, carefully shot with a telephoto lens to make the slope look as vertical as possible, turned a regional infrastructure bridge into a global internet phenomenon overnight. Here is the answer to why it looks that way. There is nothing unusual about this bridge at all. The gradient is 6.1%, on the steeper side, equivalent to countless standard overpasses across Japanese cities. Trucks, buses, cyclists all cross it daily without incident. What you're seeing in that famous photograph is telephoto lens compression. A long lens used from far away compresses distance, making near and far objects appear stacked directly on top of each other. The bridge's slope gets magnified until it looks vertical. The curve of the bridge on the Matsui side cuts off the background, so there's nothing behind the slope to give the eye a sense of distance. The illusion snaps shut. And here is the genuinely interesting question. Once you know it's an illusion, are you still afraid? Most people are, despite knowing, despite understanding the mechanism completely, despite looking at both photographs side by side and seeing the difference clearly. The primitive part of the brain doesn't negotiate with reason. It sees a near vertical drop. It is afraid. Somewhere on the other side of that lake, a fishing boat is heading out. The bridge is high enough to let it pass. The slope that looks like the edge of the world is just the price of keeping the port open. That's all it ever was. These bridges were built to solve a problem. There's nothing romantic about that. There's a gorge. It needs to be crossed. No way around it. So a bridge gets built. But looking back across this journey from the Karakoram Valley to the Alborz Mountains, from the cliffs of China to the snow of Switzerland, from a forgotten Soviet crossing in Siberia to limestone teeth above the Black Sea, you start to notice something else. The people who built these bridges were just as afraid of heights as you are. They knew the wood would rot. They knew the wind would come. They knew nature was not going to accommodate their plans. And they built anyway, because on the other side of that gorge was home, a school, a field, someone waiting. And sometimes a reason to stay even after everything else is over. Maybe that is why humans keep building bridges, even in places where nature never intended us to cross. Most of us learned the same thing in school. Rocks are formed by three processes: volcanic activity, sediment layers, or pressure deep underground. Simple, clean, settled science. And for most rocks on this planet, that explanation holds perfectly. But then you stand in front of a boulder in the Saudi Arabian desert, split so cleanly down the center that the gap runs perfectly vertical, perfectly straight, less than 1 centimeter wide, and geologists who have studied it for decades still cannot agree on exactly how it happened. Or you find a mountain in Thailand covered in scales that look like a giant serpent scales that formed naturally without any biological process, from nothing but sandstone and time. Or a cave in Patagonia, where the water is a color that no photograph has ever accurately reproduced because the physics of that specific lake produce light that cameras simply cannot process the way human eyes do. The science is real. The explanations exist. But the explanations do not make these places feel less impossible. If anything, they make them stranger. In this video, we are visiting 30 of them on 6 continents across 500 million years of geological time. If you have ever looked at a rock and felt like it was trying to tell you something, stay with us. we are about to listen. This boulder has spent centuries looking seconds away from falling. High in the mountains of Mondstadt, Myanmar, there is a rock that should not exist where it exists. The Kyaiktiyo boulder weighs 611 metric tons. It balances on a thin ledge of natural stone at 1,100 meters elevation. From below, from the only angle most people ever see it, the contact point between boulder and cliff looks smaller than a dining table. It looks like it is about to go. It has looked that way for centuries. It has never moved. One earthquake, one shift in the rock beneath, one thing going slightly wrong, and 611 metric tons rolls into the valley below. But it hasn't. Not once. Not in recorded history. Inside is a Buddhist shrine. According to legend, a strand of the Buddha's hair sealed within is the force keeping it balanced. Pilgrims climb 11 kilometers on foot to reach it, some walking through the night to arrive at sunrise. Geologists confirm the balance. The physics work out. The shape of the boulder and the angle of the ledge create a center of gravity that holds. Stand at the edge of that cliff. Look at that rock against open sky, and genuinely try to trust the physics. You can't. That's the point. Before we go further, there is one image you need to carry with you through this entire video. In the middle of the Saudi Arabian desert, two large sandstone boulders face each other across a gap of less than 1 centimeter. Each sits on its own natural pedestal. Between them, a split so vertical, so clean, so geometrically precise, that it does not look like geology. It looks like a door left slightly ajar. The gap is narrower than your finger. It runs perfectly straight top to bottom with no deviation. No one fully agrees on how this happened. A fault line, some say, differential erosion, freeze-thaw cycles working over millennia. The precision has pushed some people toward wilder theories, laser cutting, ancient technology. None of that is supported by evidence. The real answer is simpler, and somehow stranger. Geology is extraordinarily precise when it works slowly enough. Given millions of years, a natural crack can be as clean as any machine-made cut. But it does not look like that. It looks like something on the other side left it open. Both boulders carry ancient petroglyphs, horses, humans, animals carved by people who lived here thousands of years ago, when this desert was far less arid than it is today. They saw this rock. They chose to carve into it. We will return to Al-Naslaa later, but hold that image, a door in the desert left open by the earth itself. This mountain should not have scales. At first glance, it looks biological. The surface is covered in enormous rounded forms, perfectly patterned, overlapping, curving across the rock face in rows that look exactly like the skin of a massive reptile. Not similar to scales, not vaguely suggestive of scales. Scales. No biological process made this. No living thing was involved. This is sandstone and time and nothing else. A few hundred kilometers north of Bangkok, there is a mountain called Naka. Local people named it after Naka, the giant serpent of Buddhist mythology centuries before any geologist arrived. They said a king cobra turned to stone here after a great battle. Flowers and incense are still left at the base today. Geologists say the pattern came from sandstone breaking along natural joints when it weathers. The rock fractures in curves, the edges round. The pattern repeats. Both descriptions are true. They explain different things. For centuries, locals stood at this base and observed something real. That is not superstition. That is observation. The question is only what language you use to describe what you see. Standing close to the rock face, close enough to put your hand against one of those scales, it becomes genuinely difficult to laugh at the idea that something large once lived here. From a mountain that looks alive to a sea full of islands that seem to appear from nowhere. Ha Long Bay stretches 1,600 square kilometers across the Gulf of Tonkin. Inside it, approximately 1,600 limestone islands, some barely large enough to stand on, some with beaches, caves, and freshwater lakes inside them, lakes trapped completely inside the rock, invisible from the water's surface, accessible only through tunnels you have to crawl through to find. From inside, the fog distance stops making sense. Islands appear and dissolve. The scale keeps shifting. You see what looks like a small rock formation nearby, and then a boat moves past it, and suddenly you understand that the formation is enormous, and the boat is very far away. These are karst formations, limestone towers dissolved from the inside out by millions of years of rain. What you see above water is only the top portion of structures that reach deep below the surface. The Vietnamese name means where the dragon descends into the sea. The legend says a family of dragons breathed fire and dropped jade into the ocean to protect Vietnam from invaders. Those jewels became the islands. On a foggy morning before the tour boats wake up, when the water is still and the only sound is a fisherman's oar, the legend does not feel like a legend. It feels like a reasonable description of something you are currently inside. Some of these islands contain rooms that no one has entered in decades. Some contain caves that have never been fully mapped. The bay is 1,600 square kilometers. Most of it has never been closely examined. That is not a scenic backdrop. That is a maze. Now the scale changes in a direction you may not be prepared for. Zhangjiajie National Forest Park contains more than 3,000 sandstone pillars, some rising over 200 meters from the valley floor, each one covered in trees and moss clinging to surfaces that should not be able to hold anything. The tallest, the southern sky column, rises 1,080 meters. That is taller than the Eiffel Tower, stacked 3 times. And it is not unique. There are 3,000 of them. These pillars are quartz sandstone, extremely resistant to erosion. As the softer rock around them dissolved over hundreds of millions of years, they remained, growing more isolated, more dramatic every year. In 2010, the tallest column was renamed Avatar Hallelujah Mountain, after the film used these formations as reference for Pandora's floating mountains. But Zhangjiajie does not need a movie. It was already impossible before anyone made it famous. Stand at the top of Tianmen Mountain, looking down at cloud cover below your feet, with stone columns poking through the mist in every direction. The columns do not look like rock formations. They look like the remnants of something much larger, a landscape that was once continuous, now broken apart into these tall, isolated survivors. Geological time made visible. This is what 300 million years of erosion looks like. The ocean keeps trying to destroy it. The geometry keeps surviving. On the central coast of Vietnam, where the Pacific meets land, there is a field of hexagonal basalt columns packed side by side like a honeycomb, stepping down from the cliffs into the sea in perfect terraces. Waves crash against them in explosions of white foam. The wet basalt reflects the sky. From a drone, it looks like someone laid enormous tiles along the coastline with a ruler and a compass. How does rock form into perfect hexagons? About 200 million years ago, lava cooled rapidly and contracted. Because of thermal dynamics, it cracked into 6-sided shapes almost every time. The same physics, the same geometry, every time. Here is what should stop you. These same impossible hexagonal columns appear in Scotland, in Northern Ireland, in Iceland, separated from this coastline by thousands of kilometers of ocean, formed by identical volcanic physics, producing identical geometry. The Earth runs the same program on different continents in different centuries and gets the same result. Local fishermen launch their boats from these same columns every morning. They have done it for generations, stepping over 200 million-year-old volcanic tiles to reach the water. History you can walk on. Geometry you cannot explain away. Sri Lanka, a 200-meter column of volcanic rock rising from the flat jungle floor. Sigiriya started as pure geology magma, hardening inside an ancient volcano, then standing alone long after everything around it eroded. Then humans arrived and changed what it meant. About 1,400 years ago, a king named Kashyapa built his palace on top, not at the base, on top, 200 meters up on a surface barely large enough for a small city. To reach the summit, you climb 1,200 steps. Along the way, frescoes painted into the stone walls, still vivid in color after 14 centuries. Mirror walls smooth enough that ancient visitors carved poems into them. The king eventually fled. He was killed in battle. The palace was left to the jungle. What remains is a monument to a simple decision to build something magnificent in a place where building anything should have been impossible. Now into China, and something that will reset what you think a forest can be. The Shilin Stone Forest in Yunnan Province covers 350 square kilometers. Not trees, but thousands of limestone pillars up to 30 meters tall, packed so densely you walk between them like trees. The paths wind and twist. The light filters down in thin vertical shafts. Same cast process as Ha Long Bay, but here carved over 270 million years. The soft stone dissolved. The hardest sections stayed. The local Yi people call it Naigu Shilin, the Black Pine Forest. They have a legend about a woman named Ashima who was turned to stone here by a jealous sorcerer. Her image is carved into the rock at the entrance today. Walk deep enough in, and the modern world disappears. Just you and pillars that have been standing since before the dinosaurs. Still in China, still going higher. Mount Fanjing rises 2,570 meters above sea level. At the very top, the mountain splits into two narrow peaks. A Buddhist temple sits on each one. A bridge connects them across the gap. To reach them, you climb 888 stone steps carved into the cliff face. The number is deliberate. In Chinese culture, 8 sounds like the word for prosperity. Every single step carries intention. People have been making this pilgrimage for over 1,000 years. The mountain became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2018, but the mountain did not change. Only the paperwork did. Stand on the bridge between the two peaks above the clouds and ask yourself what exactly you are standing on, rock or faith. Not every geological wonder is enormous. In Shandong Province, there is a single boulder balanced on a base so thin the contact point is less than 1 square meter. It has stood there for centuries without moving. Local people call it a lucky stone. They bring offerings. They pray near it. A balanced stone. This precarious is a symbol. If something this impossible can stay balanced, then balance is possible anywhere for anyone. The shape came from spheroidal weathering water, dissolving the corners and edges of granite over thousands of years, leaving a rounded form on a narrow base. Science explains the shape. Culture gives it meaning. from the warmth of Asia to the ice of Siberia. The Lena Pillars rise up to 100 meters from the banks of the Lena River in Yakutia, one of the coldest inhabited regions on Earth, and stretch for 80 kilometers along the river's edge. In winter, temperatures drop to -60 degrees Celsius. Ice forms inside the cracks of the rock and expands, slowly splitting the stone apart over thousands of years. This is what carved them so sharply. In summer, the sun barely sets. The light turns the stone golden. Reindeer move along the banks. No other sound. One of the most remote UNESCO World Heritage Sites on the planet, worth every kilometer to get there. Norway, a fjord, a boulder. Kyaiktiyo is a rock about the size of a large watermelon wedged into a crack in the cliff face above Lysefjord. The cliff drops 984 meters, nearly 1 kilometer straight down into the cold water below. People climb up here specifically to stand on that boulder. Not near it, on it. 1 foot on each side of the crack, balanced directly above a 984-meter drop with nothing between you and the fjord but air. The hike takes 3 to 5 hours each way. The path is steep and wet. Most people are exhausted by the time they arrive. Then they step onto the rock anyway. The boulder rolled into that crack centuries ago and stopped. Every year, thousands of people make this climb just to stand where the margin between life and the alternative is about the width of your shoe. Ask yourself, would you step onto that rock? "18 kilometers down the same fjord, there is a flat plateau of stone that juts straight out from the cliff. Pulpit rock, called Preikestolen in Norwegian, is roughly 25 by 25 meters of flat horizontal stone, hanging 604 meters above Lysefjord. There are no barriers, no fences, no railing, just the edge, and then a very long fall. The rock was formed during the last ice age about 10,000 years ago, when a glacier retreated and the pressure on the cliff face changed. Cracks formed along vertical lines in the stone. A large section separated, but not completely. It held. Geologists believe those cracks are still slowly growing. At some point in the geological future, this formation will fall into the fjord. No one knows when. Could be 1,000 years. Could be longer. For now, it holds. And every summer, about 300,000 people walk to the edge and stand there. The view is not just the fjord below. It is the understanding that you are standing on something temporary, and so is everything. Iceland, where everything is either frozen burning or both. On the coast of Moai Island, a volcanic basalt formation rises from the sea in the unmistakable shape of an elephant. The trunk dips into the water. The ears have the right curve. No human made this. Lava flows cooled at different rates, creating layers of different hardness. The sea spent thousands of years carving away the softer sections. What remained was an elephant that has been standing in the Atlantic longer than human civilization has existed. Iceland sits on the mid-Atlantic ridge, the boundary between two tectonic plates. In some places, you can stand with 1 foot on each plate. The elephant is old, Iceland is new, everything here is moving. Scotland, a small island almost no one has heard of. Staffa is uninhabited, a volcanic island, half a kilometer long, covered in basalt columns, the same hexagonal shape as Zhangjiajie. But here, they frame the entrance to a sea cave 75 meters deep and 20 meters high. When waves enter, the acoustics turn the sound of water into something close to music. The cave was named after Fingal, a Gaelic warrior hero who supposedly built a causeway from Scotland to Ireland. In 1829, composer Felix Mendelssohn visited. He was so moved by the sound that he wrote a piece of music, the Hebrides Overture, still performed in concert halls today. A cave made music. The music outlasted the man who heard it. Turkey, and something that looks like another planet. Cappadocia is covered in thousands of narrow rock formations called fairy chimneys, harder volcanic caps sitting on softer, tough columns below. The soft stone erodes faster than the cap, so the caps stay while the columns slowly thin beneath them. The tallest reach 40 meters. Between the 4th and 13th centuries, early Christian communities carved their homes, churches, and monasteries directly into these formations. Thousands of people lived inside the rock, worshipping in underground churches painted with Byzantine frescoes still visible today. Before the photographs, before the tourists, before even the Christians, people looked at these rocks and saw shelter. The earth built the walls. Humans only had to move in. Into the American West, and a structure that rises 386 meters from the prairie with no warning. Devil's Tower is a column of igneous rock. Molten rock pushed underground into existing layers, hardened into a dense plug, and the softer rock around it eroded away over millions of years. What is left stands alone on the flat landscape, its sides covered in hundreds of tall, angular, vertical columns. The Lakota people call it Mato Tipala Bear's Lodge. Their tradition says a group of children were chased by a giant bear onto a low rock. The rock grew upward to protect them. The bear's claws gouged the sides, trying to reach them, and those claw marks became the columns. The story was here long before the geological explanation. Neither one is less extraordinary than the other. Most natural landscapes have a single color, or maybe two. The Bentonite Hills of Utah have dozens. Formed from volcanic ash that settled into ancient seafloors millions of years ago, bentonite clay contains minerals that create different pigments depending on their iron content and oxidation state. Red, pink, purple, gray, white, yellow, green, all occurring in stripes across the same hillside at the same time, visible simultaneously. The hills have no vegetation. Nothing grows there because bentonite clay absorbs enormous amounts of water when wet and shrinks dramatically when dry. The constant expansion and contraction makes it impossible for plant roots to establish. The result is a landscape of pure color, completely bare, completely alien. Rain turns the surface slick. Walking on wet bentonite clay is like walking on soap. Many people have slid down these hills unintentionally and had to be helped back up. The hills look like someone painted them, and in a geological sense, someone did volcanic fire, painted the ocean floor in ash, and time sorted the colors into stripes. Nevada, a geyser that humans accidentally created. In 1964, a geothermal company drilled a well in the Black Rock Desert. They hit heated water, abandoned the project, and left. But the water never stopped. Over 60 years, the water full of dissolved silica kept flowing and depositing minerals. 3 mounds grew around the wellhead, each spouting hot water into the air. Thermophilic bacteria colonized the surface and gave the mounds their color: red, orange, green. The colors shift as the colonies grow. Fly Geyser grows 15 centimeters per year. It is still growing right now. A mistake that became a landmark, an accident that became an ecosystem. Colombia, a single piece of granite rising 200 meters from a lake with 740 steps built into a crack on its side. El Peñón is a monolith, one piece of rock formed as granite cooled deep underground and exposed as everything around it eroded. It stands at the edge of a reservoir created by a dam in the 1970s. When the reservoir filled, the surrounding towns were flooded. Homes, the cemetery, the church, all submerged. The new town was built nearby. When water levels drop, tops of old buildings still poke through the surface. Local people climbed the rock afterward and painted their town's name on the side in letters large enough to read from a boat. The name is still there. At the southern tip of South America, there is a lake called General Carrera, shared between Chile and Argentina. The water is a shade of turquoise that does not look real. Inside the lake, accessible only by small boat, are caves carved directly into marble over 6,000 years of wave erosion. No floor. Water enters directly. The marble ceiling reflects the water reflects the marble, and the turquoise light fills the interior from below. The color changes with the seasons. In early spring, Andean meltwater swells the lake and the blue intensifies. The cave glows from inside. The nearest town is hours away on unpaved roads. Very few places on Earth are this hard to reach and this worth the effort. "2,000 kilometers west of the Chilean coast, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, there is an island where 900 enormous stone heads watch the horizon. The Moai of Easter Island were carved by the Rapa Nui people between 1250 and 1500 CE. Most average 4 meters tall and weigh around 14 metric tons. The largest ever erected stands 10 meters. The largest ever carved and never finished would have been 21 meters tall and weighed 270 metric tons. Every statue was carved from volcanic tuff at a single quarry, then transported to platforms sometimes kilometers away by a civilization with no metal tools, no wheels, and no draft animals. They were likely walked upright, rocked side to side using ropes. Experiments have confirmed it works. The civilization eventually collapsed, likely from deforestation and resource competition. When Europeans arrived in 1722, most statues had been toppled. The statues face inland, watching over the people, not the sea. Even after the people were gone, the statues kept watching. Australia, a cave that looks like a face. Skull Rock is a granite formation shaped by thousands of years of weathering into something that resembles, with unsettling accuracy, a human skull. 2 deep eye sockets, a curved cranium, a hollow mouth. No human made this. Wind, water, and chemical weathering did it alone. For local Aboriginal communities, rock formations are not random. They are markers in the landscape, tied to dreamtime narratives about how the land came to be and how people should move through it. The skull was not an omen to them. It was a landmark. In the center of Australia, 8 hours by road from the nearest major city, there is a single piece of sandstone, so massive that it functions as its own climate zone. Uluru stands 348 meters above the flat desert. But that is only what you can see. The rock extends underground. Geologists estimate the full structure is up to 6 kilometers deep. It is a single rock, one piece. It is 600 million years old. At sunrise and sunset, the rock changes color from pink to orange to deep red to purple as the light angle changes the way its minerals reflect. Thousands of people drive hours into the desert specifically to watch this happen. The Anangu Aboriginal people have lived in relationship with this rock for at least 22,000 years. For them, Uluru is not a landmark. It is a living document of their culture, covered in sacred sites, connected to their creation stories in ways that cannot be fully translated into English. Since 2019, climbing the rock has been permanently prohibited at the request of the Anangu people. The rock was never a mountain to be climbed. It was always something else. Eight hours west of Uluru, there is a rock that looks like a perfect ocean wave frozen mid-break. Wave Rock is a granite formation, 110 meters long and 15 meters tall. The curved face of the rock is striped in vertical bands of color gray, white, red, black, created by minerals washing down the stone face over thousands of years in wet season rains. The wave shape was created by a process called undercutting. Chemical weathering worked faster at the base of the rock, where moisture from the ground concentrated, than at the top. The base eroded backward, the top extended forward, and over thousands of years, the profile became exactly what it looks like, a wave. Stand at the base, look up at the curved stone overhead, and the sensation is real. You feel like something is about to break over you. It never does. It never has. The wave has been frozen for 2,700 million years. Deeper into Western Australia, a range of dome-shaped rock formations, each one striped in orange and black, like an enormous beehive cluster abandoned by something much larger than any bee. The Bungle Bungle Range in Purnululu National Park is made of sandstone and conglomerate formed from ancient riverbeds and desert sands. The orange stripes are iron and manganese staining. The dark grey and black stripes are cyanobacteria, living microorganisms that colonize the surface of the rock in thin layers. The formations are hollow inside. They are fragile. The exterior crust, held together partly by those bacteria, is only a few centimeters thick. Walk too close to the base without care, and you risk damaging something that took 350 million years to form. The region was known to local Aboriginal communities for generations. Non-Aboriginal Australians only became widely aware of its existence in 1983 when a television crew flew over by helicopter and filmed it. For most of human history, this landscape existed without observation from the outside world. It did not need anyone to know about it. It simply was. New Zealand, a granite boulder the size of a large room, sitting in the sea, just offshore, split perfectly in half from top to bottom. The two halves of split apple rock, called Tokangawa in Maori, face each other across a narrow gap of clear water. The split is so clean, so vertical, so even that the rock looks like a giant hand placed two fingers inside and pulled the sides apart. The Maori name Tokangawa means the rock that burst open. In Maori tradition, the split was caused by two gods fighting over the boulder. Each god wanted it for himself. They grabbed opposite sides and pulled until it broke open. The scientific explanation is simpler. A crack developed along a natural joint. In the granite, water entered and froze. In winter, the ice expanded. The crack widened over thousands of years. Eventually, the two halves separated along a nearly perfect vertical plane. Both explanations describe the same thing: an irresistible force, a split, an opening. Back to China and a landscape that looks like it was painted by fire. The Danxia landforms of Guangdong province are made of red sandstone, deposited 65 to 135 million years ago in ancient lake and riverbeds. Tectonic movement lifted and tilted the rock. Then erosion carved it into pillars, cliffs, and valleys, all in shades of red and orange. The Chinese word Danxia translates as rosy cloud. At sunset, when the red rock and red sky blur together at the horizon, the name makes complete sense. The process is still happening. The rock is still being carved. Every rainstorm changes it slightly. In a remote valley in Guizhou province, there is a stone that local people have painted with a dragon. Not because they imagined the dragon, because the stone already looked like one. The elongated shape, the curves of the natural rock, the way it rises from the hillside, the resemblance to a coiled dragon in Chinese iconography is close enough that for centuries the local community has maintained the stone as a site of worship and prayer. In Chinese culture, the dragon is not a monster. It is the symbol of power, good fortune, and transformation. A dragon stone is a place where those forces concentrate. Farmers bring offerings here before planting season. Families visit for blessing before important decisions. The stone itself is unremarkable by geological standards, just a local sandstone formation shaped by ordinary erosion. What makes it significant is everything that happened around it: the offerings, the prayers, the belief. Geology made a shape. A community made it sacred. 30 places, 6 continents, 500 million years of geological time, millions of years of human history layered on top. And here is the thing no one tells you about these formations. Every single one of them, every balanced rock, every carved cave, every striped hillside is still changing. Right now, while you are watching this, wind is carving the fairy chimneys in Turkey. Ice is splitting granite in New Zealand. Minerals are building fly geyser a centimeter at a time. The planet is not finished. We spend a lot of time looking at what humans have built: our cities, our bridges, our towers, and we forget that beneath all of it, the Earth is doing something far more extraordinary on a time scale. We cannot imagine, without any plan, without any intention, producing things we have no words for. The only honest response is the one people have always had. Stand there, look up, stay quiet, and feel what it means to be small in the best possible way. Imagine stepping into a place that actively wants you to leave. The air doesn't just feel hot, it burns. The ground beneath your feet boils, venting toxic sulfur that catches in your throat. Everywhere you look, neon yellow, acid green, and open pools of glowing magma. It looks like a toxic spill on another planet, or a CGI glitch. This is the Danakil Depression, the hottest inhabited place on Earth. That's where we're starting. And somehow, it only gets stranger from here. Over the next hour, 20 places on Earth that feel like they were designed under completely different rules. A slab of rock hanging 700 meters over an endless drop with no safety barriers. A lake that stays permanently pink. Ancient skyscrapers made entirely of mud. An island where pigs swim out to greet boats in water so blue it looks fake. 20 places. One planet that clearly refuses to behave normally. Welcome to the impossible. The ledge is called Trolltunga, the troll's tongue. It's a slab of ancient rock, jutting roughly 10 meters out from the cliff face of Mount Skjeggedal in western Norway, 700 meters above Lake Ringedalsvatnet. The shape was carved by glaciers during the last ice age around 10,000 years ago. The glacier retreated. The ledge stayed just hanging there over the water. To reach it 27 kilometers round, trip over 800 meters of elevation, gain 10 to 12 hours of hiking. In winter, the route requires crampons and ice axes. On a clear summer day, there's still a line. What the photographs don't capture is the wind. Trolltunga is completely open. Nothing blocks it on any side. Rangers have turned groups back mid-hike when conditions shifted wrong. Some days, the tip is genuinely dangerous to stand on, and the mountain gives no advance notice. You find out when you get there. But when the weather is right, and Norway gets these days cold and clear and very blue standing at the edge, produces a feeling the body doesn't have a clean word for. The stomach says step back, the eyes say stay. Neither wins cleanly. The rock holds. It's held through 10,000 winters. Probably holds today. Now drop all the altitude. Come somewhere completely flat. The Salar de Uyuni in southwestern Bolivia is the world's largest salt flat, over 10,500 square kilometers of hardened crust left behind when a prehistoric inland sea dried up roughly 30,000 years ago. The surface is so level that surveyors use it to calibrate satellite altimeters. It's one of the flattest surfaces on Earth. Below the crust, lithium brine. Bolivia's reserves are among the largest on the planet. The exact number varies depending on who's measuring and when, but large enough that this salt flat has become one of the most strategically contested pieces of ground in the world. The ground under your feet is essentially the raw material for every electric vehicle battery being built right now. After rain, a thin film of water covers the salt, and the horizon vanishes. The clouds appear both above and below you. Mountains in the distance show up twice, once in the sky, once reflected in the water, at your feet, perfectly inverted. Walk far enough from the edge, and a person 200 meters away looks like they're floating in midair. There are cactus islands rising from the flat mounds of ancient rock covered in giant cacti that grow about 1 centimeter per year. Some are over 10 meters tall. The oldest ones have been growing since before Columbus arrived in the Americas. The Aymara people have worked this salt for generations, cutting it into blocks and hauling it out. 3 flamingo species breed here, thousands of them, in peak season, standing pink in shallow brine water against white salt against blue sky. It looks edited. It isn't. Now look up. Mount Roraima rises from the Venezuelan savanna like something that forgot to finish falling. Its summit, a Tepwe, which in the local Pemon language means House of the Gods, is a sandstone plateau roughly 31 square kilometers across, sitting 2,810 meters up with vertical walls more than 400 meters high on every side. From the forest floor, you can't see the top, just the cliff and clouds sitting on it. The plateau has been geologically isolated for an extraordinarily long time. Some estimates put Tepui Formation at over 1 billion years ago, long enough that the species living on top evolved in near-complete separation from anything below. Plants, frogs, insects found nowhere else. Carnivorous plants, because the soil is so thin that trapping insects became necessary for nutrients. Black sandstone and quartz reign most days, a world that developed its own rules. Arthur Conan Doyle never visited Roraima. He wrote The Lost World, the novel about a plateau where dinosaurs survived based on descriptions from the first European climbers who reached the summit in 1884. The descriptions were apparently so strange, he didn't need to invent much. Rivers run on top, valleys too. Walk between the rock formations and the walls close in the cloud drops, and the whole place compresses to the size of a dark, wet room. Some trekkers sleep up there for 2 or 3 nights, tucked into overhangs in the cliff face with rain coming down outside. Below, 3 countries, thousands of meters of drop. The tree line's so far down, it looks wrong. The Pemon don't climb Roraima. They never have. The mountain is where their creation story begins, a starting point, not a destination. You don't go back to the beginning. Everything changes here, and fast. The Danakil Depression in northern Ethiopia sits more than 100 meters below sea level. Year-round temperatures average among the highest recorded anywhere on Earth, above 34 degrees Celsius as a baseline past 50 in summer. The ground vents sulfurous gas. Hydrothermal pools bubble in yellows and greens and oranges. Those colors come from extreme concentrations of sulfur and iron and other minerals cooking in the heat. From a distance, it looks like someone spilled a giant chemistry set across the desert. Erta Ali volcano has had an active lava lake for over a century, an open pool of molten rock that has never cooled, never sealed over, just sitting there, glowing in the crater. Some researchers describe the Danakil as a candidate for where life on Earth began. The chemistry, the heat, the mineral-rich water, broadly matching what scientists think the early Earth looked like 3.5 billion years ago. Life starting not in comfortable conditions, but in something that barely allowed for it. The Afar people have worked these salt flats for generations. Camel caravans still load up with hand-cut salt and walk for days to highland markets in 50-degree heat through volcanic gas for a few cents per block. The Afar have a specific phrase for the midday heat in the Danakil. It translates roughly as the air that eats, not hot, eating. One is weather. The other is something with intent. People who've worked here for years describe coming back after time, away and feeling the heat, as recognition, the body knowing this place before the mind catches up. You land, you step outside, and the trees are wrong. The dragonblood tree grows only on Socotra Island in the Arabian Sea, and it looks like a tree someone turned upside down, wide flat canopy spread like an inside-out umbrella trunk straight below it. The canopy collects moisture from fog and channels it down. Smart design for a dry island. The bark bleeds red sap when cut, used historically as a dye, a medicine, a wood preservative. About a third of Socotra's plant species grow nowhere else on Earth. The island separated from the Arabian mainland roughly 6 million years ago, and its ecosystems developed in near-total isolation after that. UNESCO designated it a World Heritage Site, specifically because what's here has no backup copy anywhere. The Socotri people speak a language that was never given a writing system. It exists only in speech passed parent to child, generation to generation, for longer than most of the world's written languages have existed. An entire way of describing the world, carried only in living memory. The dragonblood trees are dying. Climate change has shifted Socotra's rainfall enough that seedlings are struggling to survive. The adult trees still standing are decades to centuries old. The landscape that exists now may not exist in the same form in 50 years. The mood drops here, heavier underfoot. Between 1730 and 1736, a volcanic eruption lasting nearly 6 years buried roughly a quarter of Lanzarote in lava and ash. Villages disappeared, farmland gone. The island's small population largely fled or died. What remained was timon fire, red and black volcanic rock in every direction, no soil, almost no sound, a landscape so stripped of any biological softness that NASA has used it to train astronauts for Mars surface conditions. The craters still radiate heat. Hold your hand near any crack in the ground, and warmth comes up. 40 centimeters down, temperatures reach 400 degrees Celsius. The national park restaurant cooks its food on a grill over a geothermal vent. No gas, no electricity, just the ground still hot from a volcano that finished erupting almost 300 years ago. The artist, César Manrique, lived most of his life on Lanzarote and built his house inside a series of volcanic lava tubes underground. From the surface, nothing, just ground. Inside, rooms with walls of black basalt, a swimming pool in a natural lava cavern, living spaces that follow the shape of the rock rather than imposing on it. He believed architecture should respond to landscape rather than cover it over. The island's landscape didn't give much choice. And then pink. On Middle Island, off the south coast of Western Australia, there is a lake the color of strawberry milkshake. Not a pale blush, fully saturated opaque bubblegum pink. And the color doesn't come from the light. Fill a bottle from the lake and carry it away, and the water stays pink in the bottle. The color comes from algae Dunaliella salina and salt-tolerant bacteria that produce carotenoid pigments. The mechanism is understood. What isn't obvious until you see it is the sheer intensity of it, and the contrast. The lake is separated from the Southern Ocean by only a thin strip of eucalyptus forest. From the air, it looks like someone dropped a large pink disc between green trees and dark blue water. Like a color mistake. Like something that shouldn't render correctly. Matthew Flinders, the British explorer, documented the lake in 1802, wrote down the color, had no explanation, sailed on. 200 years later, it's still pink, still there. Iceland is being pulled apart. The island sits on the mid-Atlantic ridge, the boundary between the Eurasian and North American tectonic plates, which are moving away from each other at roughly 2.5 centimeters per year. That sounds trivial. It means the ground you stand on is measurably separating from the ground 10 meters away every year. In Haukatalua Valley, that tension expresses itself as geysers. Strokkur erupts every 6 to 10 minutes. Not occasionally, reliably on a rough schedule, a column of superheated water and steam shooting 15 to 40 meters straight up. Tourists stand at the safe distance and watch the surface of the pool dome upward, a translucent blue bulge that lasts a second or two before the whole thing goes. Then the roar, the cloud, the steam. Then quiet. Then it starts building again. The valley also has boiling mud pools, grey mud, bubbling at exactly 100 degrees Celsius, making the deep, slow popping sound of something very thick and very hot. You can stand next to them. You can't touch them. The mud doesn't care about the distinction. Iceland has a cultural phrase, theta reddest, meaning roughly it will work out. The baseline attitude of a country built on ground that regularly opens up floods, erupts and separates. The ground keeps moving. Things keep working out. Nobody built this. That's the part that keeps landing wrong. About 40,000 basalt columns rise from the north coast of Northern Ireland, most of them hexagonal, most of them fitting together with the kind of interlocking precision that looks like a floor plan, like something measured and cut. It wasn't. Around 50 to 60 million years ago, volcanic lava poured across this coastline and cooled from the top down. As basalt contracts while cooling, it cracks along lines of equal stress, and the geometry of equal stress in a cooling solid produces hexagons. Same reason honeycomb is hexagonal. Same reason you see it in basalt formations around the world. It's just math. The rock solved for efficiency without anyone asking. Irish legend says the giant Fionn mac Cumhaill built it to cross to Scotland to fight a rival. The Scottish coastline, 25 kilometers away, has identical formations at Fingal's Cave, as if the causeway was once a complete path built then broken. The Atlantic hits these columns constantly, and the sound is specific, a low drumming that you feel in your chest before you identify it, clearly waves hitting hollow stone tubes at irregular intervals. The rock is wet and slippery. The sea comes in around the lower columns without warning. There are no barriers on most of the formation. You walk where you want, and the ocean makes its own decisions about that. The columns continue underwater. How far, nobody has fully mapped. "15 kilometers off the coast of Nagasaki, a concrete island 480 meters long, 160 meters wide, shaped from a distance like a warship. The Japanese call it Gunkanjima Battleship Island. At its peak, in 1959, Hashima housed over 5,000 people in a space smaller than most city blocks, one of the highest population densities ever recorded on Earth. Coal mining island Mitsubishi ran it. Workers, and during World War II, forced Korean and Chinese laborers lived in concrete apartment towers covering every square meter of the surface. School, cinema, swimming pool, hospital. everything compressed to fit. In 1974, the coal ran out. Mitsubishi closed the mine. The 5,000 residents left within 3 months. Nobody came back. The buildings are still standing, most of them. The concrete is cracking. Seawater has come through the walls in places. Vegetation is slowly filling the gaps. The swimming pool is a rectangle of still grey water. School desks in the classrooms tilted and rusted. Corridors that had thousands of people moving through them daily now have only wind. Hiroshima got UNESCO World Heritage status in 2015, partly for the industrial history, partly for the more complicated history of the wartime labor. Japan and South Korea have had ongoing disputes about how that history should be represented at the site. The island sits in the water. The argument about what it means hasn't been resolved. Wind and water worked on limestone in the Cuenca region of central Spain for millions of years. What came out looks like ruins. Not ruins of anything that was built. Ruins of something that was only ever eroded mushroom-shaped rocks balanced on stems, 2 narrow arches spanning between formations, a mass of stone called the ship, with a prow-shaped profile, another called the faces, where weathering carved something that genuinely looks back at you. The brain keeps trying to find the architect, pareidolia, the tendency to find faces and familiar shapes in random patterns runs at full volume here. Walking through it, you keep asking, is that a doorway? A street? Did something make this decision? The rain made it. Millions of years of frost and water chemistry and runoff. Here's the specific thing that happens to most visitors. Somewhere in the middle of the site, you turn a corner between 2 formations, and the path narrows to about 3 meters wide walls on both sides, and for 30 seconds, your brain is completely convinced you're walking down a street. There's even a gap at the end that reads as a doorway. Nothing was ever there. The frost is still working. The shapes are still changing slowly without stopping. The first skyscrapers weren't in Chicago or New York. Shibam sits in the Hadramaut Valley of Yemen. Roughly 500 mud brick tower houses, many between 5 and 11 stories, tall, packed into a walled city on the edge of a seasonal riverbed. The oldest towers date to the 16th century. The construction material is the earth itself, compressed mud, sun-dried brick coated every few years with fresh plaster. The height was strategic. Narrow the streets to 3 or 4 meters between towers, build tall, and anyone attacking on foot walked into a corridor with defenders above them on all sides. The city's layout was its weapon. Mud brick has a requirement. Steel, doesn't it, needs constant attention. Every few years, the exterior plaster has to be completely reapplied, or the brick beneath starts absorbing water and breaking down. Families maintained the same towers for generations, same buildings, same maintenance knowledge passed between people who lived there and knew the walls. Several towers have collapsed recently, flooding from shifting weather patterns, families who couldn't afford the plaster or had left, and a civil war. Yemen has been at war since 2015 that puts mud plaster at the very bottom of any priority list. The towers still standing are still standing. The ones that came down are rubble back in the ground they were built from. The gap in the skyline is visible from a kilometer away. In 1876, Maharaja Ram Singh II ordered the entire old city painted pink before a visit from Prince Albert of Wales. Pink in Rajasthani tradition means hospitality. He wanted the whole city to say it. It wasn't paint, a terracotta pigment mixed into the plaster applied building by building across the old city until it was all the same color. The law requiring buildings to maintain that specific shade still exists today. Repaint your building in the old city and you're legally required to use the approved formula. Walking through the bazaars in late afternoon, the effect is genuinely unusual. Terracotta absorbs low sun differently than stone. It holds warmth in the color. At dusk, for about 20 minutes, the old city turns towards something close to gold, and the whole place seems to glow from inside out. Jaipur isn't preserved. It runs full speed, loud, crowded, dense, with auto rickshaws and street vendors and school groups. The Hawa Mahal Palace of Winds, 953 windows, designed so royal women could watch street festivals unseen from below, has a vegetable stall outside it most days. The city has been pink for 150 years. At some point, the color stopped being a decoration and became the city itself. You can't pull them apart anymore. Three hours south of Antofagasta, in the middle of the Atacama, there is a concrete hand. 11 meters tall, fingers spread palm facing up. No walls, no building attached, no explanation nearby. Just the hand and the desert and the Pan-American highway running past it. The sculptor Mario Irarrázaval placed it here in 1992, deliberately because of the emptiness he wanted. The isolation to be part of the piece, wanted no other context competing with it. People stop their cars and walk across the sand to stand next to it. The scale becomes clear. When you get close, the fingers extend well above head height, and the creases in the palm are large enough to sit in. The Atacama's dry air means the concrete barely weathers. The sculpture looks now almost exactly as it did when it was placed. The color has faded to the same gray-beige as the ground around it. No city nearby, no regular crowd. Most days, just the desert and the highway and the hand. Maybe it's for the truck drivers, the ones doing the long overnight runs on the Pan American 3 in the morning, 6 hours since the last town, and then headlights catch something massive in the dark, and they realize it's a hand, and for one moment, they're not alone on an empty highway anymore. In 1997, Dubai had roughly 70 kilometers of natural coastline. Through land reclamation projects since then, that figure is now over 1,500 kilometers. Palm Jumeirah is the most visible piece of that project. An artificial archipelago shaped like a palm tree, extending 5 kilometers out into the Persian Gulf. It took around 100 million cubic meters of sand and rock dredged from the Gulf floor and deposited in layers over roughly 4 years of construction. The workers who built it, predominantly South Asian migrant laborers, did so under conditions that received significant international criticism. The Palm is now hotels, apartments, a monorail, a water park. It shows up clearly in satellite imagery, its shape so geometrically deliberate that it reads from 400 kilometers up as an obvious human signature. An island that announces itself from orbit. It's also sinking, a few millimeters per year, as the engineered land compacts under its own weight. The seawall protecting the outer fronds needs ongoing maintenance. The Palm isn't a permanent geological feature, it's infrastructure, which means it requires continuous attention to remain what it currently is. Palm Jebel Ali Larger is already being built. Dubai keeps extending the coastline because that extension is the point the argument the city makes about itself. The Gulf hasn't fully finished responding. While Dubai builds outward, the Berber people of Matmata dug down. Troglodyte homes here are carved directly into soft sandstone. The design is a central courtyard pit, roughly circular, about 10 meters across, 6 or 7 meters deep, sunk into the earth, with rooms carved into the pit walls. Stairs cut into the rock between levels. From the surface, you can walk right over someone's house without knowing it's there. The reason is practical underground. The temperature holds at around 20 degrees Celsius, regardless of outside conditions. The Sahara above Matmata hits 40+ in summer. The homes below it stay cool. No air conditioning required. Humans solved this problem in southern Tunisia centuries ago by simply going into the ground. George Lucas filmed the Lars homestead scenes of the original Star Wars here in 1976. The Tatooine home is a lightly dressed version of a real Matmata pit house. The hotel where the crew stayed, Sidi Driss, is still open. You can book the room Luke Skywalker's bedroom was modeled on. The younger generation has largely moved to above-ground housing in newer parts of town. The pit homes need more maintenance than shrinking families can manage. Many are empty now or running as tourist sites. The rock is still there, the rooms are still cool, the desert above is still hot. This one is deliberately small. Catherine King and Wayne Adams built Freedom Cove by hand off Vancouver Island, starting in 1992, a floating homestead in a sheltered bay, assembled from salvage wood without power tools. What it became over time, a network of floating platforms connected by walkways with a lighthouse, 4 greenhouses, multiple living spaces, a painting studio, a dance floor, and a wood-fired hot tub. They've lived there since. They grow most of their food. They fish. They make and sell art, painting, wood carving, sculpture to cover what they can't produce. They row to the nearest town when they need supplies. Sea lions and otters visit the structure regularly. Bald eagles have apparently accepted it as a fixed landmark. The whole thing rises and falls with the tide and shifts gently with the seasons. They weren't escaping anything specific. They chose the work of building this particular life, the daily physical labor of maintaining it, the completeness of it. Every house is an argument about how to live. This one makes its case from the water, in a sheltered bay on the Pacific coast, surrounded by old-growth forest and apparently approved by the local wildlife. And now pigs. Big Major Cay in the Exuma chain of the Bahamas is a small, uninhabited island, white sand water that is genuinely, aggressively turquoise. The kind of color that looks retouched in photographs but is simply what the water is here. And swimming in that water, pigs, around 20 of them, paddling out to meet approaching boats. Nobody is entirely certain how they got here. Leading theories, sailors left them as a food cache and never returned. A nearby farm relocated them to avoid neighbor complaints, a shipwreck. The pigs have been there long enough that their origin story doesn't really matter anymore. They swim. They approach boats because boats sometimes have food. They are clearly comfortable in water. It is completely absurd. It is also just good. The water is that blue, the sand is that white, and pigs are swimming toward you with what appears to be genuine enthusiasm, and there is no explanation that makes it less delightful. Some things don't need to be more than what they are. Stop, slow down. In central Sulawesi, a small lake on a small island, Pulau Papan, in Lake Paisupok, sits surrounded by forested hills. The water is clear. On calm mornings, the surface is completely still. Fog sits on it until mid-morning, and small fishing boats move through it slowly, the sound of oars carrying clearly in the quiet. No records, no extremes. The people near the lake have fished it for generations. That's it. After 18 locations that have been actively trying to kill someone, or defy physics, or challenge what a building can be made of, Pai Supok is simply a lake that is very still and very clear, and has people fishing on it in the early morning. The documentary doesn't need every place to be maximum. This one earns its place by being the breath between the last thing and what comes next. And then the ground opens. Mount Merapi, not to be confused with the more famous Merapi in central Java, rises 2,891 meters above some of the most densely farmed land in Indonesia. Paddy fields extend right up to the lower slopes. Villages cluster at the base. The soil here is extraordinarily productive because volcanic deposits continuously replenish its minerals. Communities have farmed it for generations. Merapi has erupted dozens of times in recorded history. In December 2023, it erupted while hikers were on the summit trail. No warning issued mountain open that day. 23 people were confirmed dead. Others were injured, descending. The villages at the base did not evacuate. They were outside the immediate hazard zone, and they did not leave. The farmers went back to their fields. The calculation these communities have made is not sentimental, and it's not ignorant. The soil is here because of the volcano. The water comes off the mountain. Families have lived and buried their dead here for generations, and they know the risk better than anyone looking at it from outside. They know what it costs when the mountain erupts. They've paid it before. They stayed because the alternative, leaving the most productive land, they have costs more than staying. Merapi sends up a thin grey plume most days, ash drifting above the green fields, quiet enough to miss if you're not looking. The farms stay green. The smoke keeps going. "20 places. Start with a ledge over a 700-meter drop where people wait in line. End with a farming village at the base of a volcano that killed 23 people last year and had the fields back in production within days. What those two things share a calculation. What the body knows versus what the situation asks for. The Norwegian hiker's stomach saying step back while the eyes say stay. The Sumatran farmer knowing exactly what the mountain is and going back to the field anyway. Every place in this video runs the same tension. The Afar salt miners loading camels in 50-degree heat for a few cents a block. The Aymara people working a salt flat sitting on top of the world's lithium supply. The families in Shibam replastering the same mud towers their great-grandparents built in a country in the middle of a civil war. None of them are doing this because they don't understand the risk. They understand it better than we do. And somewhere right now, in the Danakil Depression, a camel caravan is crossing the salt flats before sunrise. 35 degrees, even in the dark. Salt blocks strapped to camels worth only a few cents each. And somewhere in Norway, another line is forming before dawn. People about to spend 10 hours hiking just to stand on a ledge for a photograph. Different climates, different continents, same instinct, people stay where the world pushes back. The world doesn't sort neatly into livable and unlivable. It never has. The people living here figured that out long before the rest of us arrived with cameras. Drop the place that stayed with you in the comments. We actually read them. New documentary every week.